Okay, so you're ready to level up your cooking game, right? We're talking about the king of the kitchen, steak.
Yeah, steak.
And not just any steak,
Yeah.
a perfectly cooked steak. You know the one. Golden brown crust, juicy and tender inside.
Mm,
Makes your mouth water just thinking about it.
absolutely.
That's what we're diving deep into today,
That's
folks.
right.
I've got a whole stack of books, articles, everything steak right here.
Really done your research.
Had to, got to do it right. And honestly, I've learned a ton already. Like, you wouldn't believe what most people get wrong about searing a steak.
Oh, yeah,
We'll get to that, though. First things first, got to start with the basics.
definitely. Fundamentals are key.
So we're talking steak selection. Our sources pretty much all agree. If you're pan searing, your top contenders are ribeye, New York strip, and filet mignon.
The classics.
Yeah, the classics. I mean, they're always a good choice.
Yeah.
But why exactly are these cuts the best for pan searing?
Well, it all comes down to marbling. You know those little flecks of fat you see throughout the meat? Ribeye, strip, filet mignon. They're known for that beautiful marbling. And that's what gives you that melt in your mouth tenderness and flavor when you sear them.
So more marbling equals more flavor.
Pretty much. Plus, these cuts tend to be about an inch thick, which is the ideal thickness for cooking evenly on the stovetop.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've chosen our steak. Now, here's a step I'll admit I sometimes skip, but all our sources say it's crucial. Bringing the steak to room temperature before cooking.
Ah.
I mean, does it really make that big of a difference?
It's honestly huge. Think about it. A cold steak straight from the fridge, it's going to cook unevenly.
Oh, yeah.
You'll end up with that gray band around the edges. And nobody wants that.
No, that's not the look we're going for.
Right, and that beautiful brown crust we all love? A room temperature steak browns way better thanks to something called the Maillard reaction.
The Maillard reaction. Sounds intense.
It's basically a chemical reaction that happens when the proteins and sugars in the meat hit that high heat. It creates all that amazing flavor and aroma we associate with a perfectly seared steak.
So it's not just about the color, it's about the flavor, too.
Exactly.
Science. Okay, room temperature check. Now let's talk seasoning. Pretty straightforward, right? Salt and pepper.
Salt and pepper are the foundation. You got it.
But is there a technique? Like a certain amount?
Here's where a lot of people go wrong. They're too shy with the seasoning. Be generous. Don't be afraid to really season that steak.
Okay, so really go for it.
Yeah, salt not only enhances the flavor, but it also helps draw moisture from the surface of the steak. And that actually contributes to better browning.
Interesting. So more seasoning equals more flavor, A&D, a better crust. I like it.
Exactly.
All right, now for the main event. The sear.
The moment of truth.
This is where the magic happens.
Okay.
What are the key things we need to know to get that perfect sizzle?
High heat is essential. I'm talking screaming hot pan. You want to choose an oil with a high smoking point too, like canola vegetable or peanut oil.
Why those specific oils?
It's all about that smoking point. That's the temperature where the oil starts to break down and release those bitter chemicals.
Yeah, you don't want that burnt oil taste.
Exactly. The oil should shimmer in the pan, but not smoke.
I've definitely made that mistake before using the wrong oil.
It happens.
Not a good flavor.
Nope.
Okay, so now we've got our hot pan, our oil, all those good things. Here's something I've always wondered about. All our sources say don't overcrowd the pan. Why is that so important?
Well, when you put too many steaks in the pan, the temperature drops. And instead of searing, you end up steaming them.
Oh,
And remember that Maillard reaction we were talking about?
yeah.
That needs high heat to work its magic. Plus, overcrowding prevents air circulation, so you won't get that crispy crust you're looking for.
It's like baking cookies in an overcrowded oven,
Yeah,
right? They won't brown properly.
perfect analogy.
Okay, another thing I've heard is you shouldn't press down on the steak while it's searing. Is that true?
Absolutely. Resist the urge to press. When you press down on the steak, you're squeezing out on those delicious juices. You know, the juices that keep it moist and tender.
Yeah.
And it can also lead to uneven cooking. Just let that steak sear undisturbed. It knows what it's doing.
Hands off.
Yeah, hands off.
Got it. Okay, now let's talk about doneness. Our sources give some guidelines for cooking times based on thickness and how you like your steak cooked. But they all emphasize the importance of a meat thermometer. Why is that so crucial?
A meat thermometer takes all the guesswork out of it. You know, everyone has their own idea of what medium rare means.
Oh, yeah.
A thermometer gives you that precise temperature so you can cook it exactly to your liking every single time.
I actually heard a tip the other day, and I was wondering if it's true. Someone told me to take the steak off the heat a few degrees before it reaches my desired doneness because it keeps cooking as it rests. Is that a real thing?
That's a great tip. And yeah, it's absolutely true. It's called carryover cooking. The internal temperature of the steak will continue to rise even after you take it off the heat. So if you're going for medium rare, which is about 130 to 135 degrees Fahrenheit, take the steak off the heat around 125 degrees, and it will reach that perfect medium rare as it rests.
Wow, that's a game changer.
Hmm.
See, this is why I love these deep dives.
Right.
So many little details that make a big difference.
Absolutely.
Speaking of details, we can't forget about the butter and herbs. Our sources say this is an optional step,
Mm.
but it really takes the steak to another level.
It's like adding a touch of luxury. Basting the steak with melted butter infused with herbs, it adds so much richness and depth of flavor.
Yeah, and what kind of herbs work well with steak?
Thyme and rosemary are classic pairings. They add a
Yeah.
really nice earthy note. Garlic is always a winner too if you like a more pungent flavor.
I can practically smell it now, that herby, buttery goodness.
Mm-hmm.
All right, last but not least, we got to talk about resting the steak. Why is this step so important?
Resting allows those muscle fibers in the steak to relax. They tense up
Mhm.
during cooking, and resting gives those juices that have been driven to the center of the steak a chance to redistribute. If you cut into it right away, all those juices spill out and you end up with a dry steak.
Ah, so resting equals juicy steak.
Exactly. Patience is key.
How long should we let it rest?
5 to 10 minutes is a good rule of thumb. Just loosely tent it with foil to keep it warm.
All right, the moment of truth. The steak is rested. We're ready to eat. How do we slice it for maximum tenderness?
You want to slice against the grain. Look at the steak and you'll see the direction of those muscle fibers. Slice perpendicular to the fibers and you'll get the most tender bites.
So we're not just slicing randomly. There's a technique.
Exactly. Oh, and here's another tip. Let the steak rest on the cutting board for a few minutes before you slice it. This lets the juices settle so you get cleaner, easier cuts.
Awesome. We've covered a lot of ground today. I feel like I could go head-to-head with any steakhouse chef now.
I think you could.
I mean, from choosing the right cut to the science of searing and resting, there's so much more to cooking a great steak than I realized. But honestly, the biggest thing I'm taking away from this is to stop pressing down on the steak.
Yeah, that's a common mistake.
I know it seems so counterintuitive, but now I get why it's so important to just let it be.
Right.
So what's the next step for our listeners? They've mastered the basics. Now what?
Now it's time to get creative. Experiment with different seasonings. Try new herb combinations. You could even explore finishing touches like a drizzle of balsamic glaze or a sprinkle of flaky sea salt.
Ooh, that sounds delicious.
There's really no limit to what you can do.
That's the beauty of cooking, right?
Absolutely.
It's all about making it your own. Well, folks, there you have it. All the secrets to cooking a perfect steak. Now go forth and cook amazing steaks.
Enjoy.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive.
See you then.